And that is, in a way, a motivation for them to come up with a lot of the theoretical formulations in the practical criticism school. You know, William Emerson, Seven Types of Ambiguity. The next year he wrote it, 1930. Another wonderful book. So, what is the essence of practical criticism school? In formalism, we found they wanted a literary science. Form determines content. Here, they wanted to be literary surgeons. Please remember, a surgeon is one who dissects. And not everyone can dissect. Earlier, we talked about the marketplace critic, that is the public critic, and the academic critic. Only the academic critic can dissect a text. Why? A surgeon, if she has to dissect a text, if a body, a patient, she should have what is called surgical devices, isn't it? But without surgical devices, the implements, they cannot dissect or do surgery on a patient. Something similar. A literary surgeon should have access to what is called literary tools. They are called the surgical implements of a literary critic. So, ladies and gentlemen, presenting all of you here, literary surgeons. We are all literary surgeons, right? We dissect. And successfully, you have finished a BAs, MAs, MPhils, and PhDs, and now we are ready to dissect, attack a text, right? So how do we do that? By having our own literary devices. What are these literary devices? Like defamiliarization is a device that the formalists use. Here they have their own range of literary devices. Ambiguity is the literary device. Paradox is the literary device. Irony is the literary device. Tension is the so a whole lot of these literary devices. Only if you know these literary devices, you can attack, or what is called, you can work or dissect a text better. And they were beautifully emulated in America. Please remember, there are 4 schools in 4 different parts of the world. The 20th century, the formalist school in Russia, the practical criticism school in England, the new criticism school in the United States, in the American South, and structuralism in France. So I began with formalism with a purpose, right? And then we moved on to what is called the practical criticism school. Now we'll go to the new critical school that is in the United States. And they were influenced, obviously, heavily influenced by the formalists. And the formalists were influenced by the structuralists. We'll come to that later. Yes, right? The structuralist approach to the synchronic study, right? They were influenced, yes. So the practical critics in England, the new critics in America, American South, they were heavily influenced by the formalist mode of analyzing a text. And what happened was, the Vanderbilt University, right? Professors, all of them were professors. John Crow Ransom, right? He came up with this 1941 wonderful book titled New Criticism. And from then on, a whole lot of great scholars. Clint Brooks, The Language of Paradox, The Well-Wrought Urn, The Heresy of Paraphrase, right? All these texts, right, advocate a textual approach. Text for the sake of a text. The author is not needed. The biography of the author is not needed. The context is not needed. Nothing is needed, just the text. So, importantly, Wimsatt and Beardsley, they came up with 2 terms. We all know that: affective fallacy and intentional fallacy. Intentional fallacy is trying to find the intention of an author when they wrote a particular poem. When Wordsworth wrote Daffodils, for example, the teacher says in class, the professor says in class, you know what Wordsworth was thinking? Wordsworth was thinking about his lady love. That is trying to find the intention of the poet. It's a fallacy. It's wrong. You cannot do that. The poet might have had any other intentions, many intentions. It's a fallacy. Don't go into the author, they say. Affective fallacy is evaluating a work of art based on its emotional effect on the reader. For example, when you read a moving book or you watch a moving scene in a movie, like in Titanic, Jack and Rose, right? You are moved to tears, or it affects you. Oh, this is a good work. That is also a fallacy according to the new critics. T.S. Eliot called them the lemon squeezing school of criticism. Take the utmost meaning out of a text. Nothing else is needed. And that's how the new critical school became prominent in the United States, even after the wars, right? It was prominent. And even today, right, most of the schools and colleges, they celebrate or practice only the new critical approach. They don't go into anything else. Mostly they celebrate the practical, the formulas, the new critical approaches to text. Next, the final school of the 20th century that has a lot of importance. There are other schools also, the new Aristotle, many schools are there, but I'm focusing on these four for want of time. The fourth important school I come to it last for a purpose, for a reason at that. Right? The structuralism, the school of structure. And after 3 or 4 years, again you happen to watch this movie in DVD or in any other mode, then you forget it. But maybe during these holidays, quarantine holidays, again they show it on the television. So 3 or 4 times, it's called recursive watching or recursive reading. When you read a book again and again and again, it's called recursive, R-E-C-U-R-S-I-V-E, repetition. When you read something again and again, you can easily dissect or analyze the underlying structure behind that particular movie. Structuralism did exactly that. They wanted to see or to study underlying structures behind language, underlying patterns behind anything. It could be culture, language, society, kinship. They wanted to see the underlying structures or the underlying principles that make something possible. Please remember, structuralism was a very pioneering movement because they were the first ones to emphasize on the importance of language. And the trigger for structuralism, you'll be very curious to know, right? Most of us might not have known, right? The trigger for structuralism, Ferdinand de Saussure, right? What did Saussure do? He was a linguist. He loved languages. So he was analyzing or studying or researching as a student. He was researching on the Indo-European family of languages. And he was also trying to find a connect between the three classical languages, Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit. He found the vowel patterns were almost the same in all the three, right? In quinque in Latin, penta in Greek, and pancha in Sanskrit. So he found the vowels almost similar. This set his heart and mind thinking. When he was just 21 years, he published his findings. And slowly thereafter, right, his love for language made him plunge into, right, structuralism. And you have a wonderful, right, theory that has impacted almost every aspect of life today. Although post-structuralist theories have always debased structuralist approaches, we should also remember, if there was not a Saussure, there is no Derrida, there is no post-structuralist theories. Such was the power of structuralism. Even today, in media studies, in journalism, in any other field, you will find structuralism is taught as a paper or as a subject. The reason is structuralism helps you analyze the underlying pattern. For example, I tell you a story, a short story. After a particular point of time, when I continuously repeat, a patterns of a short story, you will try to dissect the underlying pattern, isn't it? Like I always tell this story to my students, right? A pretty girl was standing at the bus stop. A boy was standing near her. This girl was having a dog near her. So the boy wanted to strike a conversation with this pretty girl. So you know what he said? Nice dog you have. Thank you, she said. The next question he asked was, does your dog bite? She said, no, my dog doesn't bite. Then he bent down, stooped, and started coaxing the dog. He started stroking the dog. Immediately, the next moment, the dog bit him on the hand. The boy was very unhappy, very angry also. Then he looks at the girl and says, but you said your dog doesn't bite. Then she said, yes, but this is not my dog. So look at that. A short story has a structure. 4 basic patterns in any short story. What is that? A premise, a development, then a complication, then a denouement or a conclusion. A complication could also mean a climax. A short story has this pattern to it. Like that, a novel has a pattern. Fairy tales have a pattern. Like Vladimir Prop, looked at that. So these patterns, underlying principles of a short story, underlying principles. This is what structuralism does. And structuralism says everything in our life, the reality that we have in our life, is conditioned by what is called a system, which is called, codes. It could be any code that governs our lives. We are governed by codes. One such code is the system called language. Indeed, the reality that we have in front of us, we could say, we feel reality, but the reality that we have in front of us is mediated through language. That's the power of language. Lacan also says that, the symbolic order. So, the power of language, for the first time, Sajua brought out. And he did a study. And through the study, he found out, I'm quickly going through it because of lack of time. He talks about binary constructions, where meaning is obtained through binaries. The meaning of a word lies in its opposite. So the meaning of a sun lies in its opposite, which is called moon. If a person is fair, that means they are not dark. Right? The meaning lies in the binary, in the opposite. And he gave us a lot of formulations. I'm not going into that. You can look up structuralism in your leisure time after you log out. But structuralism told us something very important, that almost he had a lot of disciples also. Claude Levi-Strauss, he applied structuralist principles to anthropology, to the study of people kinship in particular. Roland Barthes applied it to the study of mythologies, and there are many others who applied structuralist principles, like Northrop Frye, right? He applied it to archetypes, like that. Underlying patterns. When you study that, it becomes easier to know the basic premise of how something exists. So this is what structuralism is all about. And these 4 schools, right? The formalist school, and the practical criticism school, the new critical school, and the structuralist school. They were not rebellious. They were not political. Before we jump into theory, they were not political by any ways. Right? They were just advocating their own formulations for analyzing a text. So then came up controversies and crisis. In Russia, in Soviet Russia, the formalists were pressurized. So they had to renounce practicing formalism because the Soviet government felt that they were a threat to their principles. So the formalists slowly bowed out. Roman Jakobson went over to the West for doing some linguistic research, and the other formalists They went into writing